Upon looking back at my Dark Souls 2 review, I have become bothered by my lack of giving credit where it is due. While I briefly and quickly pointed out a handful of things that the sequel improved upon, I was in such a rush to further the review that I not only glossed over some of them, but skipped a great deal more. Therefore, here it is, a full list with some level of explanation for each item of all the improvements that Dark Souls 2 created. Hold on to your asses because there are 52 of these things. Before we get started, however, there's a couple more things that need to be said. First, a bunch of points I'm going to make are elements in the series that have already been further enhanced by Bloodborne. This makes sense, of course, because it is the latest game, but I am still going to include them. Why? Because it is the first Dark Souls and Demon's Souls that 2 is rigidly compared against. Second, I realize and admit ahead of time that the majority of these are likely subjective. Most things in life are, especially when dealing with video games. There are many items on this list that I would be baffled by a person who disagreed, but your opinion is your opinion, the same as mine is mine. Will that stop me from listing them? Absolutely not, because I feel it is necessary to give Dark Souls 2 the praise it deserves before 3 is officially released outside of Japan. Third, and lastly, I want it to be clear that this list does not mean that I consider Dark Souls 2 to be the best game of the 4. It is still the worst, despite that I can't bring myself to play the others again. It's a confusing constriction I have placed myself in because, while the other games have far superior level, world, and boss designs, the things I care most about, they are mechanically inferior in my opinion. Oh, and please enjoy these duels with my buddy Super Instadeath while I ramble on. I didn't feel the need to record little bits of gameplay showcasing the various things that I will be listing. We've all played the game and we all know what I'm talking about. If you haven't played the game and are still watching this video, then here's hoping you'll give it a chance. Rolling. Without a doubt the greatest improvement in Dark Souls 2. When I go back and attempt to play Dark Souls 1 now, I am thrown off by how limited my rolls are. This is the issue that stops me from playing Dark Souls again. To be able to roll in any direction you select is not only genius, it's as obvious as decisions come. Movement while aiming bows. Another thing that seems so obvious now that we have it. The movement is slowed greatly compared to normal, and that makes sense, but you aren't stuck like you are caught in a bear trap. It opens up the possibility of not only firing for longer as the enemy approaches, but possibly even faking out their attack when they do get close. Dual wielding and power stancing. In every way this is better than Dark Souls 1. Even if you don't raise your stats high enough to power stance, the left-hand attacks now function appropriately with the right. If you do decide to power stance, you've unlocked a new moveset that exists with a simple hold of a button. Left-handed movesets. Since I just mentioned it, this is a separate point of improvement. Never mind dual wielding on this one. You can actually hold a weapon primarily in your left hand now, with a shield or catalyst in your right, and function as if a normal character. This not only lends itself to being more friendly for left-handed players, but can throw off opponents. They even created one weapon that is specifically better when held in the left hand. Weight with weapons. A change that is risky and sometimes even I argue is not better, but this is only because it is a concept that needs further tweaking. As far as that concept goes, though, that of weapons having weight and requiring a player to be more careful and strict with their swings, I think it's brilliant. It means that you can't just smash out attacks over and over again, but instead have to aim and put forth greater effort. Animation canceling. This applies to casting primarily, but does exist for some weapons as well. I primarily believe it to be an improvement when it comes to casting, because the length of those animations oftentimes feels extraordinarily long compared to a rabid attacker. To have that split second in which you can change your mind and roll to safety helps casters not become obsolete compared to high-energy melee builds. Gesture canceling. I consider this a separate improvement because of how horrible gestures are in both Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne. I can't believe they reverted back to being stuck within a gesture. I ask you, for what purpose? Sometimes all you want to do is show a summoner that you are not AFK. So you tap a gesture, then roll to the boss fog they just entered. Some gestures take a really long time too, and if you have a PvP opponent who doesn't want to wait for you to finish your gesture, you can get yourself to a combat ready status in an instant. parry and backstab damage, in that it can be received while you are performing either of these. Now, the parameters are not exact. I've had mobs hit my position for no effect while I backstab something else, but it does happen, and it is not an accident. I think it's a worthy improvement because it ultimately helps deter those who rely so heavily on backstabs and parries. And just a side note here, I am still hopeful for a future when they eliminate backstabs entirely. It was a bad idea from the start, but From refuses to let go because people are expecting them to be in the games. Flask healing speed. If you watched my review, you know that I am not a fan of the sheer amount of healing items that exist in Dark Souls 2. But that doesn't change the fact that they immensely slowed the speed in which flasks heal you. In both Demons and Dark Souls, you would recover in an instant, able to flask or grass tank through even the strongest attacks that the bosses could unleash. Having to actually be wary and strategic about healing is absolutely better. Weapon variations. One thing that a lot of people complain about in regards to Dark Souls 2 is that the vast majority of weapons are merely copies and hold no value. I disagree. Strongly. If you actually pull them out and play around with them, you will find that different requirements, weights, stat bonuses, and movesets especially, create a world of so many more build choices. It frees up the player from being strict about their stats when wanting to use a weapon type, like in Dark Souls and Demon Souls where a few different builds were king. Weapon upgrade paths. This is something that is only better than Dark Souls 1, not Demon Souls. The very first Souls game still absolutely has the best upgrade paths, but Dark Souls 2 at least comes a lot closer than 1. They are almost all worth using on different builds, unlike in 1 where you would really only want to go physical or, no, pretty much just physical. I'm still hoping that Dark Souls 3 does this even better, more like Demons, but with applications to armor as well. Fourth School of Magic. Now I know, technically Dark Magic was in Dark Souls, added in by the DLC. However, it was really just a handful of spells that broke the damn game. In Dark Souls 2, it is a fully fleshed out school, and this primarily improves the game because it means you will have to be even more on your toes when facing a caster. Separating equipment burden and stamina. You know why this is an improvement? Because now you don't necessarily have those wearing the heaviest, most durable armors also running around with the most stamina. Havels were one of the most frustrating things in Dark Souls PvP, and this stat separation eliminates all those who roll that build without thought. Now you have to make a dedicated commitment to leveling two different stats if you want to emulate a true Havel monster. People argue this one back and forth, and I can easily see both sides of the argument. On one hand, it means having to basically raise the level in which you will find the most PvP action, but on the other hand, in addition to what I already pointed out, it also helps the game feel even more like an RPG. I'm the kind of guy who prefers the item weight in Demon Souls and the equip burden stat in Dark Souls 2. No wasteful stats. Now this is something else of hot contention, because not only of the separate equip burden stat, but adaptability forcing you to invest points if you want to roll like normal. I don't dispute that, but it is a part of the game and the difference can be felt between builds that have leveled them and those that have not. It's not like Resistance that was never worth putting a single point into. Even if you are flustered by them, it is a fact that all of Dark Souls 2's stats are effective when invested in. Backstab delays. If there's one thing you should know that I disliked about Dark Souls 1, I would want it to be the backstabs. Fucking instant laggy nonsense that completely ruined the game for me. I'll never PvP in Dark Souls again. In 2, however, there is a delay in the animation that allows people to roll away if they are not in the middle of another action, and also assuming that action can't be cancelled. I hate the whiff, and still think having an animation at all is dumb, but at least it is better in Dark Souls 2 than the other games. Natural backstab protection. You cannot be backstabbed by someone simply strafing around you. Your character will turn and prevent the attempt, disallowing access to their backside. It is by your actions, a mistake in casting, attacking, or movement, that allows for someone to deliver a backstab. This is huge in my opinion because it compounded the effort required for the success of a backstab. Arrow and bolt firing slots. You could equip the same number of arrows and bolts in Dark Souls 1, but you had to hit a button to switch to whichever of the two pieces of ammo you wanted to fire. It's only a tiny thing, but an improvement is an improvement. In Dark Souls 2, you hit R1 or R2, or L1 and L2 if you have it in the other hand, to fire which kind of bolt or arrow you want. It makes a difference especially if input delay is taken into consideration. 70% rolling breakpoint. This seems like perhaps a silly thing to list, but the 50% breakpoint in Dark Souls 1 always felt so damn limiting. Having it at 70% means you can take far more armor sets and piece combinations into consideration when creating your build without investing in equip burden as heavily. There's an argument to be made that this decision came with a separate equip burden stat, and that may very well be the case. From my perspective though, it is better in Dark Souls 2. Equip percentages shown. Instead of guessing or grabbing a calculator, or worse, ruining your build by leveling too many points somewhere, you are shown the exact percentage at which your build sits. It's nice knowing what kind of roll you are going to do without equipping stuff, rolling, trying different combinations, and wasting time. Fashion Souls. One of the best things they did in Bloodborne was to have armor stats become meaningless, so that it was all about fashion. However, this also severely injured the roleplay gaming aspect of the game. That's why Dark Souls 2 was far better than all three other games, because with the equip burden at 70%, and there being a ton of choices for armors, you could go hog fucking wild in terms of fashion and still be protecting yourself. Treasure everywhere. My favorite gaming motto is kill stuff, get treasure. And while this is done perfectly well in Dark Souls, there is even more treasure in Dark Souls 2. Now, it can be argued correctly that Dark Souls did a far better job of placement and pacing with its treasure, but that doesn't change the fact that there is 10 times as much sparklies in Dark Souls 2. Decent looking characters. The only game of 4 to accomplish this, and the other 3 games you could really only make statuesque and ugly creatures. In Dark Souls 2 your characters could be genuinely attractive, and there were plenty of options to assist with that. Now this excludes the man shoulders on women, but From isn't going to change that, so they don't have to create multiple versions of armor sets. Gender swap. As silly as this is, it's still nice to have the option, if for no other reason than for the sake of having options. All games need to have as many options as possible, and this counts as one that the others do not have. I've never even used it myself, but I know people that have. Now they also need to include a character editor once already in the game. There's no reason we should be stuck with a character that doesn't quite look right in the armor we've selected for our builds. Cloth physics. Yes, it's unfair to list this because it's a matter of technology improving as time went by, and of From learning how to program better, but I don't care. Much of the armor has pieces that flow and move, unlike the rigidness of the 2 games before it. 3 slots per hand. Yep, I think this is an improvement. It is a matter of balance, of course, the game requiring you to possibly need 3 weapons ready at once. However, there's always something to be said about having more options, or at least the option of having multiple weapons at the ready. I've never made a PvP build that uses 3 weapons in one hand, but it's better knowing that the option is there. Besides, I have made a build that uses a weapon, catalyst, and bow all in one hand. 4 ring slots. Same thing, different equipment slot. And again it comes down to balance. Another caveat though, in that more rings worn means more variety, and particularly means that not everyone will be 50% Ring of Favor and Protection. It opens up options for builds, particularly because they generated a much larger number of rings. 10 consumable slots. While I dislike how many healing options there are, I believe the 10 slots to definitely be an improvement. I like having all those options open to me without having to go into my inventory. If the game is going to throw all manner of ailments and damage at you, then you should be able to have counters at the ready. Greatly improved inventory. My god, is it frustrating to play Dark Souls 1 or Bloodborne in terms of inventory management. In every way the boxes are an improvement over the extended lists. Now if only From would combine separating weapon types like in Demons to the boxes in Dark Souls 2, then it would be perfect. Using multiple souls at once. Do I even need to speak on this? Instead of using a consumable soul one at a time, painfully, you can munch them all down at once, or any number you desire. Torches. It needs to be credited even though it's not perfect and vastly superior in Bloodborne. Dark Souls 2 added torches to the Soulsborne universe, and that should not be overlooked. They were shitty until improved in Scholar of the First Sin, but who cares? The game added them regardless. When you enjoy using a torch in Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3, remember that you have Dark Souls 2 to thank for their existence. Name Ring. Speaking of things the game added that will go overlooked, the name ring allowed for far easier cooperation. You could quite easily meet up with your friends because you will only see the signs of those wearing the same ring aligned to the same god. Online connectivity. I don't give a shit that this is merely a matter of Bamco's servers and coding. It's still better, and it makes Dark Souls seem like a dinosaur in terms of online participation. Hell, that game felt dated in terms of online services when it released. Functioning arenas. Neither of them were too difficult to get to, and with the online connectivity being as good as it is, the arenas are a great location to PvP. I want to take this opportunity to point out the argument that having dedicated arenas detracts from the regular invasions in-game. While this could be true, it also allows you to find players who are ready and willing for a fight, and that is a better measure of a build and a player's skill anyway. Ladder movement. It's only gotten better in Bloodborne, but Dark Souls 2 was a necessary step in terms of being able to speed up and slide down ladders. Not only that, but they added the ladder jump. While unnecessary 99% of the time, or maybe even 100% of the time, it's still something that the games previous did not have. I'm going to repeat something that I said in my Bloodborne review here, that now all FromSoft has to do is realize that any stamina lost or regained slowed on the ladders is stupid. Make them all one, fast speed, so that we can get on with the game. They aren't ladder climbing simulators. Weather. It's only present in a handful of zones, but it's more than Dark Souls had. It's strange because Demons had intense wind, just like in the Aerie, but it went missing from the game in between. I love the weather effects in my games, so I'm hoping this trend continues, even though it was entirely lacking in Bloodborne. And that's not necessarily a dig at Bloodborne, because they went for a constant murderous fear instead of any weather. Pharaoh stores. Not the zone, but the devices. One of the things I was most excited about initially with Dark Souls 2. Special switches that you wouldn't be able to activate the entirety of, and that would do unusual things. This proved basically false on both accounts, but the concept is still amazing. Secret walls by activation. As a fan of the Kingsfield games, I never liked striking at walls to find secrets. I greatly prefer going around and pressing on them as if you were searching in a role-playing game. Hitting the walls is not only bad for your weapons, but wastes a bunch of time. Weapon degradation in the HUD. It's a small thing, but if weapons are going to degrade, then they should be represented on screen. It's an action series after all, and sometimes the enemies just keep coming, so we need to be able to monitor equipment with just a glance. I actually hope that they find a way to have our armor and rings monitored in the midst of combat as well. Trap chests. Not just the mimics, because those were present and slightly better in Dark Souls 1, but the various traps were a great surprise. I hope for even more kinds of traps in the future, like with doors, fog gates, and ladders. Ascetics. If bosses are going to offer more than one item with their soul, then an ascetic is a great addition because you don't have to waste a bunch of time going through the entire game again for one or two things. It's also an improvement if you want a portion of the game to become harder. Personally, I enjoy having specific bosses at the ready for battle anytime I use an ascetic. It's a great way to highlight the best fights when you are bored. Company of Champions. I'm pointing this covenant out separately from the others because of its ability to immediately raise the challenge of the game. If you're a pro who's beaten the game a bunch of times already, you can easily score a new challenge right from the beginning. This means that not only does the difficulty raise 7 times through going into New Game Plus cycles, but 7 more times atop that by way of the champions, meaning that Dark Souls 2 has the most options in terms of difficulty. Covenants that all function. Sorry, Dark Souls lovers, but most of those covenants were either broken or useless. In Dark Souls 2, they certainly aren't perfect, and not all of them are worth the effort you have to put in, but they all at least work. I've experienced all of them without going out of my way, but I can count the times I've been Gravelorded on one hand, and that was when working with someone all day to see anything. Please note that I am aware that this is in part to the broken connectivity of the first Dark game. New Game Plus changes. The games have always gotten progressively harder as you went into further New Game Plus cycles, but in Dark Souls 2 they moved and added mobs to increase the challenge even further. Now at times this became a frustrating addition to Swarm-U, a farce difficulty if you will, but the concept is still something I adore. I strongly hope this is repeated in Dark Souls 3. Pyromancy not a dexterity tool. This being true in Dark Souls was the second stupidest thing I've seen in a Soulsborne game. Both fire and dark magic are now respectively earned through magical investment, leaving melee builds to catch up in those departments if they want to cast. Dexterity builds were vastly superior in Dark Souls because of this mistake, no others even in competition. Casting weapons. A sweet addition that absolutely must continue. In fact, I want this to be an upgrade path in Dark Souls 3. Penalize the physical damage of a weapon, but transform it into a casting tool. Bosses outside their chambers. It's only 2 bosses, and one of them was done poorly, but it's something I was hoping for ever since I first saw the Capra Demon and Taurus Demons standing around as normal enemies. They screwed up with the Pursuer, but the Freya interruption toward the beginning of Seldora is fantastic. Being hit at fog walls. You might be surprised that I consider this an improvement, but I do. One of the sillier things in the first 2 games was that you could run by everything so long as you touched that boss fog. I much prefer actually having to contend with the level in order to challenge the boss. It's not even an issue in most zones so long as you plan and roll appropriately, but it's better this way than being invulnerable. I hate invulnerability. Bosses with phases. Didn't Bloodborne start this? Oh no, my friends, it did not. Now, to be fair, Dark Souls technically did this first with 5 bosses, but one of those was the icky gross Bed of Chaos. Dark Souls 2 has double that number at 10, and none of them are as icky of choices. Fast traveling anywhere. My most controversial pick. Most likely. I don't like that you can fast travel to any bonfire you've reached right from the start. That makes the game a little too easy and convenient. There is a mixture between the 2 Dark games that I think would work perfectly. In the context of Dark Souls 2's layout, I think the bonfires on the way to any primal bonfire should become warp capable when that primal bonfire is lit. As an example, the primal bonfire behind the Lost Sinner should allow warping to the Salt Fort, the Bastille, No Man's Wharf, and Hades Tower. Or perhaps better yet, it should be that killing each boss unlocks the bonfire after them for warping, and then killing the big boss, the primal boss, unlocks them all along that path. All I know is that it is far too much of a pain in the ass in Dark Souls, and too easy in Dark Souls 2. However, when it comes to not wasting a player's time, I care about that more, and so Dark Souls 2 is an improvement. Bonfire warping screen. I love it. I love the individual zones being shown by pictures and titles, and then the bonfires having their own pictures and titles as well. The list in Dark Souls seems so very antiquated by comparison. I also love that, since aesthetics exist, it shows at what strength each bonfire is. 3 DLCs. Some would see this as not only a sour note, but a betrayal by FromSoft. I can't argue that it felt like, at the time in the summer of 2014, that they simply cut the content to sell as DLC. It came out awfully close to the release of the game. At the same time, they feel very different and the main game is rather expansive even without them. Additionally, they added on some of the best content in all 4 games. Shulva is my absolute favorite zone, without question. What I consider the best design and atmosphere in the series, even beating out Latria. Also, who doesn't want more Souls content? Having 3 DLCs, as opposed to none or one like the other games, gives you that much more playtime. Also, who doesn't want to support FromSoft all that they can? I know I do, and even though I'm close to poor, I want to give my favorite developer any money when I can. Trading it for DLC content seems like a great transaction to me. Soul Vessels. I'll be damned if respecking isn't something that is stupidly obvious. I work full-time, have a wife, have a baby, have friends, want to read, gotta do yard work, have other chores, and am trying to write several novels. To play through the game every time I want to try out a new character was cute during Demon's Souls, frustrating in Dark Souls, and fucking dumb as Returned in Bloodborne. Dark Souls 2 is easily going to get the most PvP time from me because I can simply respec, like an adult. It takes far less time to gather everything I could want with one character than to gather a lot with multiple. Screw those people who say you should just create another build, or that it takes the same amount of time. You're wrong. Clearly have less going on outside of gaming, and you're dead wrong that it takes the same amount of time. I'm sitting here as proof that you are wrong. On the PS3, I made approximately 12 characters, and it not only took forever, but I only PvP'd with them a tiny bit because I had gotten bored of them after getting through the entire game already. On the PS4, I put forth the effort to collect everything at only 30,000 soul memory, by way of the Agape Ring, and I have invested far more time into PvP and with various builds because of it. I've used any build I've made more than I ever did when making it from scratch on the PS3, because it was fresh right as soon as I started. New Game Plus a choice. Bonus selection, I lied when I said it would only be 52. I saved this one for last because it is my true favorite improvement. In Demon's Souls, you knew very well that there was no going back once you jumped into the pit, because the game told you as much. In Dark Souls, you didn't know for sure, and I was baffled that we were automatically launched into New Game Plus. Then, for some retarded Miyazaki reason, this not only returned in Bloodborne, but you could barely know that the end of the game was even coming. I truly hate a game forcing you into a New Game Plus cycle, as Souls-esque as it seems after it began in Demon's Souls. They were limited in their thinking, and proved that they know a better option exists in Dark Souls 2. Of course it should be the player's choice, and not directly tied to defeating the final boss. I'll say it now, and I mean this in full. If Dark Souls 3 catapults you unwillingly into the next New Game Plus cycle, it will automatically mean, for me, that Dark Souls 2 is the superior game. Alright, that's the list, though I am sure there are a few more that I've forgotten. Can you think of any improvements that I might have overlooked? Do you disagree with any of my points? I'll be glad to read through anything posted in the comments.